Hey everyone, and welcome to the tutorial series for the NPC Manager system. In this video, we're going to learn how to migrate the NPC Manager to your own custom project. And for that, I've actually prepared a separate document, and you can see the link right here. It's a Google Docs that's going to explain to you step by step what you need to do to migrate it to your own project. And what we're going to do in this video is I'm actually going to follow this every step of the way in video form. But if you don't want to watch or you just want to make it even quicker, there's going to be a link on the video description on how to go to this document. Feel free to go there and just follow at your own pace. Otherwise, what I'll do is I'm actually going to move this off screen to my side screen here, and I'm going to open Unreal, and we're going to follow all of the steps. So the very first thing that we will do is we want to make sure that we open a fresh copy of the NPC Manager system. So go ahead and download it from the launcher, open it in whatever engine version you have, and as soon as you open it, you should see basically what I have right here. You should be on the level showcase, and if you click on the root folder here, you should see everything as expected. The next thing we want to do is we want to open our own custom project. This is the project where we want to move the NPC Manager to. And what I did is, to save a little bit of time, is I've created a regular third-person project in Unreal, but I made some very small changes. All of the different folders that you see here, Geometry Mannequin, I moved into one root folder called My Game. Not very creative, but just for keeping things organized. And I changed the color of my pawn of my character here to bright red, and that is because we want to make sure that we are looking at the correct player character once we start adding code. That is basically all I did. Everything else is basically the stock project that you would find when you just create a new project in Unreal. So if you have your own project, this is going to be a very nice proxy, and you can see that we are here. I just call this my custom project too. So all right, so inside our own custom project, we are going to go to settings, project settings, and we need to add a few changes here on the project settings before we migrate. We want to go to collision right here. You want to add a new object channel, and we click on the button here, new object channel, and we're going to call it NPC, all caps, underscore navigation. And we want to make sure that the spelling is exactly correct, and the default response should be ignore. And that is because every other object in your project will have that option added to their collision. You want them to automatically just ignore it. You won't have to make any other changes. The blueprints that you're going to bring in are going to have the correct changes. So go ahead and click accept, and you should now see that we have a new channel here called NPC navigation, and the option ignore. Next, we want to go to crowd manager, which is right here, and we want to change the max agents to something much bigger than that, and I recommend something like 600. You see, we're using the crowd manager class in Unreal Engine to make sure that the NPCs navigate correctly once you have a lot of NPCs in your scene. And the max agents is basically a hard cap by the engine of how many agents can be simulated at a time. So if you leave it at 50 and you add more than 50 NPCs to your level, you'll notice that some NPCs will not work. So you can just go ahead and make this really big, 600. You probably won't have 600 or more. That's just a really big number. We want to make sure that they're all working all the time. And the next one is we're going to make a small change to the navigation mesh. So go down here to navigation mesh and look under navigation mesh. I was looking on the wrong place. Make sure you click on navigation mesh and scroll all the way down to agent radius. By default is 34. Let's change this to 10. And this is basically going to allow the NPCs to navigate through tighter spaces in the nav mesh. I found that 10 is probably a better number You can always come back and adjust this number, but again, let's go ahead and start with 10 as a default to make sure that the NPCs can really navigate through your world. All right, and that is pretty much it. I made sure that we don't have to make any changes to input. So all we have to do now is start the migration process. So make sure that you close it. And now let's go back to our NPC Manager project, and we're going to click on the NPC Manager folder here, right click, select migrate, and you're gonna see a bunch of stuff here, basically everything inside. Click OK. And then you have to navigate to your projects folder. And in this case, it's not this one, it's my custom project 2. So I want to go back into templates in my case, and we're going to go all the way down, my custom project 2, and we want to select the content folder. This is very important. If you don't do this, all of the references will be broken and you'll have to basically start over. So select content, click on select folder, and now we're going to wait a little bit for all of the folders to be copied. Notice that sometimes you'll see that some content was not copied. That's okay. That is normal. That's because some of the content is already in your own project. So go ahead and you can close it or minimize it. And now when we go back to our own custom project, notice that now we have the NPC Manager folder as well as our original folder called My Game. Sometimes you'll get this extra folder called Blueprints, and this is the FBX importer, and you have a few things here. You actually don't need this. This is an artifact from the copying of the files, so you can actually go ahead and delete this. And notice that there are no asset references, so this is safe to delete. And the same thing for the folder Blueprints. Right click and delete. And now we're back to where we were supposed to be. We have our original folder, My Game, and now we have the NPC Manager folder. Okay. The next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we copied all the files and everything is supposed to be working correctly. So let's navigate to our Maps folder on the NPC Manager. So click on NPC Manager, Maps, and we are going to open the level showcase. Just give it a second here to open. And notice that in my case, no shaders have compiled, and that's because I have the project on my own machine. You may encounter a bit of a compilation. That's normal, so just go ahead and wait for the level to open, and you should see this screen right here. Now we want to go to World Settings, and if you don't have this here, I believe you need to go to Window, World Settings, and then once you have that open, we want to go to Game Mode Override, and we want to select BPGM NPC Manager. That's the game mode that comes with the NPC Manager system. It will automatically select the correct pawn and player class and everything. And we're doing this just as a test. So once you have that selected, go ahead and click play. And notice that now in your custom project, we have the NPC Manager pawn. And we know that because it has this orange color here. And if you click on the left mouse button, you see that we're shooting these little balls. If you press tab, you can see that we switch to a first person view. If you press left shift, you see that you're sprinting. So everything seems to be working just as it was working on a fresh copy of the NPC Manager. And if we're walking around, you see the NPCs are just kind of spawning and walking around. Everything is great. So the migration was a success. Now we need to move on to the next step, which is we want to make sure that you can use your own character with the NPC Manager system. And thankfully, it's actually not a very complicated process. What we want to do here is, now that we've done this, we want to navigate to the Blueprints folder. So NPC Manager, Blueprints, Characters, Player, and we're going to open the BP Player Blueprint here. And this is going to be our reference point. We're going to be copying some code and components from our BP player to our own custom character. So go ahead and wherever that custom character is, go ahead and open your player character. In this case, for me, is third person character. And you can see if I go to the viewport, this is the character in red. All of the components here, everything is exactly stock Unreal Engine. So we're going to start from here. The very first thing we'll do here on our custom character is we are going to add the component comp player NPC check. And we're going to go ahead and compile and save. This is the component that will check for nearby NPCs in case you want to use the optimization option. Next, we want to go back to our BP player, and we want to copy this volume here called interaction, this little guy here. So go ahead and click on, right click and say copy. Go back to your own custom player, and you can select the capsule and say paste. And you see that we have this guy right here, aligned perfectly, and even the collision options should be exactly the same. You'll notice that it says custom, and everything should be exactly as in the player character. We're going to do the same thing for the spawn point here, and this isn't necessarily needed, but let's go ahead and do it because we want to make sure that we can test the damage system. You can always remove this later. So the same thing, right click, copy spawn point, then go to your own custom player, right click and say paste, and notice that it pasted in a different location and the spawn point is completely messed up. That's okay. Go ahead and parent it to mesh. Then with the spawn point selected, let's go ahead and scroll all the way up and reset the location and rotation. And now let's go back to BP player, and with the spawn point selected, you can come here to location, right click and select copy, go back, paste. Now we're going to do the same thing for the rotation, copy and paste. Notice now that the spawn location is correctly rotated with the X towards the front and is far enough so when the little projectile spawn, they will not collide with our player. Okay, so notice that now if we look at the components here and the components here, we have the most important one, player NPC check and interaction, and we also have the spawn point. You do not need to copy the FP camera. This is just for this character to be able to go into first person mode. You don't need to do that, so we're not going to do it here. Let's make sure that now, once we do that, it is time to copy all of the interaction code to our custom player. So click on event graph, and you'll see that we have this huge section called interaction in all caps, and we're actually going to completely copy all of these nodes. Make sure everything in here is selected, right click, copy, and then let's go to our custom character, go to the event graph, and just go all the way down here somewhere and click on, well, you can click on Control V for pasting. Whoops, and it wasn't, I'm gonna undo this. I don't want any overlap, and we're going to paste it now. Okay, and we can now move it. Now, once we do that, we notice that these nodes seem to work because interaction is the same name here, interaction. So all of that works. This is simply using the key E for interaction. So we're not colliding with any of our input settings. But notice that there are two variables that are grayed out that need to be created. So all we need to do, and this is very convenient, is simply go ahead and click somewhere else, right click on the variable and click create variable. Notice that they now become the correct color. We're going to do the same thing for here. And now notice that we've created two variables. Click compile, click save, no errors. So now all of this code is now there. The next thing we want to do is we want to create the shooting function that we have here on BP player that is actually allowing us to spawn that projectile, because we want to make sure that we can damage the NPCs with our own player. So notice that we have a function called fn shoot. We can go ahead and open it, and it's super simple. We're just spawning a projectile here. We want to recreate this inside our own custom player. So we want to come here to the third person character, and we want to create a function, and we're going to name it the same, fn shoot. All right. And now we want to go back to the player, and we simply want to copy this code right here. So Control C, go back to our third person character, Control V, and let's just align it and connect it. Click compile and click on save. Now we want to go back to our event graph, and right here we want to switch to the VP player, and here under the event graph we are going to copy this collapse graph called shoot. So go ahead and select it and copy it, and go back to your event graph on your custom character, click somewhere and do Control V, and that'll paste the graph. And it'll say shoot _2, we can just rename it to shoot. And if you open it, you'll see some red arrows here. And all we need to do is we need to select these two nodes, right click, and select refresh nodes. Notice that now they become white, and when you click on compile and save, everything seems to work correctly now. Okay? All right. One last thing that we want to do is we need to add additional tags to our third person character, or our custom character rather. So what you can do is you can click on class defaults. Class defaults here, and then under the search details, just simply start typing tag, and you'll see this section here. And all you need to do is add two tags, one called player with a capital P, and another called NPC, and this is all caps. And this NPC tag is simply to make sure that the door prop opens as well. If you're not using that in your game, you can probably just remove it, but just go ahead and keep it for now. We want to make sure that everything works. Player and NPC. Okay, now I'm looking on my screen here, just make sure that we did everything correctly. And I believe that is pretty much it. We just have one more thing that we want to do, and then we're done. And that is, there are two cases here. If you're not using a player controller, a custom player controller, then you are pretty much done. So if you're not using a custom player controller, so let's say that you open your game mode, and in this case it's third person game mode, and under player controller class, you just see player controller, that's just the default class. If you don't see, if this is what you see, that means that you are not using a custom player controller. In that case, we want to use the NPC player controller, the player controller that comes with the NPC manager. And that is called BP NPCM player controller. Go ahead and add it to your custom game mode. And notice that we have our default pawn classes, the third person character, that's our custom player. You can compile and save. And now if we go to level showcase, we can remove the override. Just click on this little yellow arrow here so that we are not overriding the game mode anymore. We press play, and now we have our own custom character in the level showcase. And notice that as we're walking, we are seeing all the messages appear. If we press the left mouse button, notice that we are shooting, so the shooting function worked. And all of the NPCs seem to be working correctly. You can see here, NPCs are spawning, they're all moving to their respective places. All of it is working. And we want to make sure that we test two things, and this is why I'm walking a little bit slow here. I should have probably added a sprint to this blueprint, but I didn't. And we want to make sure that we can interact with the NPCs. That's what we added, that interact volume, and then we can damage the NPCs.
They're all doing
so
fine.
Go to player interaction with your custom character, get close to Howard here and press E. And if everything works correctly, notice that that Howard is now looking at you. Kind of hard because I don't zoom in here. But notice that he's looking at you and you see this sample dialog box that appears there. If you walk away, Howard should disengage.
How are you?
I've been better.
And now go to the player damage and
How's your
shoot at
family
one
doing?
of these NPCs. And
Son
we
got
can
the
now
flu
confirm
last
that
week.
we're indeed damaging the NPC and he's running away. So our custom player character has the correct tags, can interact with the NPCs with the volume, and he can actually damage the NPCs correctly. Everything else should be working as expected. And if you look at the optimization video on how we use the proximity system, everything should work correctly. However, there is one use case, and this is very likely if you have a more complex project where you do have a custom player controller. So we have a few additional steps if that is the case. And if that is the case, and I created a dummy one called My Player Controller. If I open it, there's literally nothing here, but we're going to assume that this is your own player controller. So let's add it to our game mode instead. My Player Controller. And now we need to add additional functionality to our own player controller so we don't need to use the NPC Manager controller. So very simple. All we need to do is go into the NPC Manager, Blueprints, Characters, Player, and we're going to open the NPCM_player controller, and all we will do is copy this code here. It's a custom event that is going to try and interact with the NPC. So go ahead and click Control C, and now go back to your own custom controller, and on the event graph, paste it. You should see that everything looks correct here. Compile and save. And lastly, open your custom player controller. Go into your event graph, and right here under E, when you're pressing to interact, what we want to do is we want to change the casting from the NPCM player controller to your custom player controller. So drag from get player controller, drag from here, and start typing cast to, and in my case, my player controller is literally called My Player Controller. So whatever your player controller is, make sure that you have it here. And from here, from this node, drag out, and we're going to type event interact, and you can see that the code that we just added appears here, and we're going to use this event coming from this controller. Now, we want to go ahead and move this out of the way and move this in. So connect is valid here, and notice that now we have two things that we need to connect. The NPC controller is coming from here, so go ahead and connect it there. And the player pawn is self, and connect it there. Now you can go ahead and remove these two, and now you have your own player controller calling the correct event. And now if we go back to our level showcase, and we're going to spawn right here just for keeping things quick. Select current camera location and play. We are now using our own custom controller, and if we come here, notice that we are now interacting with Mike. So everything is working as expected, and of course we can damage Paul and he can run away. Everything is now working as expected, and we are using our own player controller. You can see here in our game mode, and now the migration is complete. So as you guys can see, it's fairly simple. It only gets a little bit complicated to make sure that you can use your own player character, but at the end of the day, all you need to do is copy a few nodes and an event here and a few components, and you're good to go. All right, guys, as always, if you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to email me at this email address or DM me via Discord. I'm pretty active there. Join our community. And make sure that you look at the written guide. Again, the link is going to be in the description so you can follow it step by step. All right, guys, thank you so much. That is pretty much it for this video. Let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you in the next one.